Good afternoon, everyone. Is the microphone working? Yes. Oh, there it is. Good afternoon. Just if you can find your way to your seat, we'll get started in just a minute. Hello, my name is Chris Herbert. I'm the Managing Director of the Joint Center for Housing Studies, and it's really my great pleasure to welcome you here today to the Graduate School of Design for Housing and Innovation, Lessons from the Ivory Prize for Housing Affordability. What I'd like to do first is set a little bit of the context for why it is we're here today. And I think where that starts with is a story about the housing affordability crisis in this country. And I think I get the question from time to time, is this really a crisis? And I think the answer is yes, it is a crisis given the extent to which affordability has grown. And right now there are 38 million households in the United States spending more than 30% of their income on housing. 38 million. In addition, there are 18 million who are spending more than half their income on housing. And when we're talking about people spending more than half their income on housing, there really is not much left over for anything else. And if we think about this problem for renters, the problem is even more extreme. 47% of those renter households spend more than 30%, 25%, 1 in 4 spend more than half their income on housing. Now, one of the reasons why this is a crisis is because this problem has actually gotten much, much worse over time. We do have a tendency, both in the media and in academia, to try to get headlines to talk about how have things changed from last year over the last few years. And if you look at that perspective, you say, well, it wasn't that long ago when it was 50% of renters rather than 47% who were cost burdened. But I think we have to take a longer perspective of time. If we go back to the year 2000, it was only 39%. So we've seen an increase of about 12 percentage points over the course of this century in how many households are cost burdened. And if we go back even further to 1960, it was only 25% of renters, only 12% who were severely cost burdened, spending more than half their income on housing. So this is a problem that has been getting worse decade by decade. And at times like this, when we have unemployment of under 4%, we're seeing some improvement, but the ground we gain is only a fraction of what we lost. The other aspect, I think, of the housing crisis today that's different is if we look at who it is who's affected by this, it's always been the poor who have paid too much of their income on housing. But now, and particularly if you're in high-cost markets, it's a problem of the working class, of the middle class. In any market in the country now, 80% of households making under $15,000 a year, that's working year-round, full-time at the federal minimum wage, is spending more than 30% of their income on housing. If you go to LA or San Francisco or Boston, if you're making $45,000, $50,000 a year, you're also spending more than 30% of your income on housing. So why is this? How do we get in this situation? And fundamentally, when you break it down, it's a question of what's happened to housing costs and what's happened to incomes. So again, going back to 1960, since that time, over the almost 60 years since that year, if you look at what's happened to the median income among renters, it's gone up in real terms, after accounting for inflation, by about 10%. But the median rent on an apartment has gone up 70%. That's a 60 percentage point gap between what's happened to incomes and rents. Now, if we look at homeowners, it turns out that incomes have gone up much more. There's been a great bifurcation and inequality in this country, too, about who gets access to home ownership. Incomes among homeowners have gone up by 50% over that period of time. But if you look at the cost of a home, it's gone up 112%. So again, we're seeing about a 60 percentage point gap between what's happened to income and what's happened to housing costs. So the big problem is housing costs are gone up faster than incomes. Well, why is that? If you break that down, well, one reason is because, in fact, if you look at the housing we build nowadays, it's bigger. It's got more amenities. It's fancier in many respects than the housing we built 50 years ago. So the typical single-family home in 1970 was under 1,500 square feet. Now it's almost 3,000 square feet. The typical multifamily apartment unit had 1 bathroom. Now it has 2 bathrooms. So we're building higher-end housing. So that's part of the problem, bigger and more amenities. Another important part of the problem is that production methods have not changed. McKinsey Global Institute did a study a few years back and looked at changes in productivity across the economy. And they've seen since the mid-1990s there's been about a 2.5 times increase in productivity in the broader economy relative to what's happened in residential construction, which has only been a 1-fold increase. And so we're seeing the construction sector really not benefit from the kind of productivity gains we've seen in the rest of the economy. Land prices is another part of the problem. Land prices have gone through the roof, particularly in markets where there has been tremendous growth in demand, both in terms of expanding economy and in terms of how much people at the top of the income distribution are making. And then last, we also have to look at regulations. It's become harder to build high-density housing, to take advantage of land and make better use of that scarce resource. It's become more time-consuming, more complex, and more expensive to build. So all these things together have added to housing costs. Housing, the quality, the size of housing, how we build it, the cost of land, and construction. And we've gotten ourselves into a pretty big hole. This is among the basic work that we do at the Joint Center, which is to document housing problems. And for this, we've earned the moniker, well-deserved, I think, of being the Joint Center for Doom and Gloom. But today, we don't want to focus on the doom and gloom. We want to focus on the reasons for optimism. And I think there is reasons for at least cautious optimism, because what we're seeing is that this nature of the problems that we're facing are spurring innovation. They're spurring innovation in terms of design of homes, designing smaller homes, homes that are more efficient in how they operate, simpler to construct, and they are both good places to live and good places to have in your neighborhood. We're seeing new construction methodologies. We're seeing new financing schemes. And we're seeing new attitudes and approaches to regulation that can help address all of these factors. But if these innovations are going to make a difference, they need help. They need financial help. They need technical help to make those good ideas into a reality. And they need a bully pulpit to spread the word about these ideas and get them not just happening in one corner of the country, but happening throughout the country. And so we're here today to hear about some of these innovative and important approaches to design, build, finance, and how we regulate housing to help spread the word. And we're here today, importantly, because of Clark Ivory. Clark, who saw the need to identify, to support, and to proselytize these innovations as a way to address the nation's affordable housing crisis. When Clark approached me about being a judge or an advisor to his Ivory Prize, inaugural Ivory Prize, I said yes, because I wanted to have a chance to learn myself about these ideas and to help spread those ideas. I had no idea how successful that this first year would be, and I'm excited to continue to be part of the prize going forward. I'm very happy now to have the opportunity to introduce to you Clark Ivory to kick off this event and tell you more about the Ivory Prize. Clark is CEO of Ivory Homes, which has been the largest home builder in Utah for 29 years. He also started a new business in 2006 to develop and manage apartments, being among the first people to realize the way the preferences and demand and needs were changing away from just single-family homes. Clark has a long record of public service, working with the Federal Reserve, working with the University of Utah, and he's also a Harvard grad, so we get to claim him as one of our own, having graduated from the business school. So please give a warm welcome to Clark Ivory.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to express my gratitude to Chris Herbert and the Harvard Joint Centers for Housing Studies and also the Design School for hosting us here today. You know, housing affordability is one of the most pressing issues right now facing our country. 18 months ago, I came back here to visit with Chris as I asked him to help us out with the Ivory Prize, as he said. He, Carol Galante, by the way, many of Carol Galante's accelerator groups are here today. They're doing amazing things out there at Berkeley right now, and you'll see some of them in the audience. But these two people, along with Kent Colton and Laurie Goodman, and also Natalie Gochner, formed our advisory group. It's important that we had a credible advisory group so that we could immediately have an impact in this space. But that wasn't all, that wasn't enough. What the Ivory Prize is all about is about innovation and collaboration. And I really think that the only way that we see that happening is if we look to the future and we look to the young people who are going to make that future. Affordability is no longer just a coastal problem. We're in Utah. Over the past few years, I've been asking myself, what can we do to avoid the housing crisis we have observed in California? Many Californians are relocating to Utah, and I knew we would get caught up in the same trap where the population continues to grow and not nearly enough is done to build housing, or particularly housing that's moderately affordable. Over the last 10 years, in fact, in Utah, we've seen an enormous housing gap build up. There have been 50,000 more households formed in those 10 years than there have been housing units built. This is a big problem, and it's a problem that had been building in California for decades. Because incomes, like Chris said, are not keeping pace in Utah with home prices, it's become a crisis there. So let's get back to what are the solutions. We needed to look outward. We understood. We couldn't just look at solutions in our own state. We needed fresh approaches. And after putting together this advisory group, we then looked to our up-and-coming generation, the Gen Zs, really, and we pulled them together, and we started to put together a housing innovation course at the University of Utah. So we have a few of our students from that course here today. They're here with my daughter, Abby, who heads our initiative in this program. These kids are not only involved with us in vetting out the companies and the innovations that are applying for the Ivory Prize, but they are also coming up with solutions themselves. We've held what we call Hack-A-House at the University of Utah the last 2 years, and just a few weeks ago we had one at Washington State University. They understand what's going on up there is just off the charts, even in some areas of Washington beyond what's going on in California. And we plan on having another Hack-A-House in Berkeley in just a few weeks. What happens at Hack-A-House is that we bring the students together for a 24-hour marathon, and they're jamming on solutions in housing. And that's all they do. They drink a lot of Red Bull, but otherwise they're just getting it done. Coming up, and it is amazing to hear the creative thinking and the ideas, and this has gotten them totally energized about now going out and with more passion looking at the innovators and the companies in this space and deciding what works and what doesn't work, and then they come to our advisory board and say, hey, this is something you've got to look at. We're hopeful that we could do Hack-A-House maybe back here at Harvard next year. Now let me tell you about the Ivory Prize. This last year we had 126 companies and organizations that applied in the 3 areas that Chris sort of outlined: construction and design, finance, and regulatory reform. Our group decided this is where the innovation has to take place, in those 3 areas. We know that there is not one single solution that will help us solve this housing affordability challenge. It's so many different things that come together. Our students dug into every company and recommended a top 20 group for us as advisors to really evaluate and look at. Today with us, we have our top 10. You're going to love hearing from them. They are amazing people who are passionate. The thing that I really was amazed at last year when we joined at the National Press Club in DC, where we announced the winners, was the dinner, but the evening before, there were all these innovators gathered together, and they just were so open source. Everything they were discovering, they wanted to share with everybody else. And it's just amazing, but they have had a tremendous impact, I think, on one another. And they continue to share. I was just talking to one of our winners, and she's from Austin, Texas, and the Alley Flat Initiative, and she said, since they've been recognized by the prize, they now have cities all over the country that are coming to her and asking her, how do you do this? What are you doing with your new ADU policy? How are you really getting it in place? What are you doing to make it take off? How did you get a $250 million bond passed in Austin? What are the things that you've done that have made this happen? It's almost to the point that she can't keep doing her work. And so we probably need to get her some help. But we are passionate about innovation, but we're also equally passionate about collaboration. It is those 2 things that are going to solve the housing challenges in this country. And I think you are all here today because you care about this issue, and I know that we can count on you as collaborators. So thank you for coming out, and I hope you'll be excited to hear from the innovators that we've recognized in this last year.